Look at this beggar woman, thinking she can crash a wedding like this. The groomsmen's cruel laughter echoed outside the elegant Atlanta estate as they doused Loretta Johnson, a weary black woman clutching a tattered bouquet, with champagne. Her weathered face glistened with tears and wine, yet her eyes held a quiet strength no one noticed. In the glittering chaos of Amara Johnson's perfect wedding, this moment of heartless mockery was meant to fade into the night. But what unfolded next would unravel a hidden past, revealing a mother's unbreakable love and a daughter's buried shame. A single powerful truth, spoken from a place of pain and dignity, transformed a night of celebration into a testament to redemption. Please subscribe to our channel to hear this moving story and share where and when you're watching from, because Loretta's words will leave no heart untouched. The Atlanta sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the Whitfield estate, its sprawling lawns and ivy-draped arches shimmering like a scene from a fairy tale. Inside the grand bridal suite, Amara Johnson stood before a floor-length mirror, her reflection a vision of elegance. Her ebony skin glowed against the ivory lace of her custom gown, each bead catching the light like a tiny star. At 28, Amara, a black woman who had clawed her way from a crumbling Atlanta neighborhood to the elite circles of New York's design world, was about to marry Ethan Whitfield, a white heir to a real estate empire. The wedding was the talk of the city, 500 guests, a string quartet, and roses cascading from crystal chandeliers. It was her moment, her triumph, her perfect dream. Yet as the seamstress pinned the final fold of her train, Amara's hands trembled. Her phone, resting on the velvet ottoman, buzzed softly. She ignored it at first, her heart already racing with the weight of the day. But when it buzzed again, she glanced down, and the world seemed to tilt. A handwritten letter, slipped under the suite's door by an unseen hand, lay open on the table. The words, scrawled in a familiar shaky script, pierced her like a blade. "My dearest Amara, I'm so proud of you. I'll be there to see you walk down the aisle. Love, Mama." Loretta Johnson. The name alone was a ghost from a past Amara had buried deep. Her mother, once a beacon of warmth in their cramped Atlanta apartment, had become a shadow, lost to whiskey and despair after Amara's father died. Amara had spent a decade crafting a different story, one whispered to friends and colleagues. Her parents were gone, tragically taken when she was young, leaving her a modest inheritance to build her glittering life. It was cleaner, simpler, a shield against the mess of truth. But now Loretta, the mother she'd erased, was coming to her wedding. Amara's breath caught, her fingers crumpling the letter. The seamstress, a kind-eyed woman in her 60s, noticed the sudden pallor on Amara's face. "Miss Johnson, you all right, honey?" she asked, her southern drawl soft with concern. Amara forced a smile, the kind she'd perfected for boardrooms and galas. "Just nerves," she lied, her voice barely steady. "Could you give me a moment?" The seamstress nodded, gathering her pins and stepping out, leaving Amara alone with the weight of her secret. She sank onto the ottoman, the letter trembling in her hands. Loretta's words were a time machine, pulling her back to a childhood of laughter and love before it all unraveled. She could still see her mother's smile, wide and warm, as they sat cross-legged on the living room floor, stringing popcorn for a Christmas tree they could barely afford. Loretta had been a teacher then, her voice bright as she read Amara stories of far-off places, planting dreams of a bigger world. But those memories were tainted by later ones. Loretta stumbling through the door, reeking of liquor, begging for money to get by. The shame of those moments had driven Amara to sever ties at 18, to flee across the country, to build a life where no one knew the truth. Now that truth was clawing its way back. Amara's heart pounded as she imagined Loretta at the gates of this pristine estate, her worn clothes and weathered face a stark contrast to the polished guests in their designer suits and gowns. Ethan's family, the Whitfields, were old money, their lineage as pristine as their manicured lawns. His mother, Margaret, had already raised an eyebrow at Amara's modest background, though she'd never probed too deeply. What would they think if Loretta showed up? A living reminder of the life Amara had hidden. The thought made her stomach churn. She stood, pacing the room, her heels sinking into the plush carpet. The letter wasn't the first sign of Loretta's return. A week ago, a voicemail had come late at night. Loretta's voice soft and slurred with emotion, not alcohol. Amara, I know you don't want me there, but I've changed. I just want to see my baby girl get married. Amara had deleted it, her hands shaking, and blocked the number. But Loretta was relentless, her love a stubborn flame that refused to die. Amara had built walls. New city, new name, new story. But her mother was scaling them, threatening to shatter the perfect dream she'd crafted. Outside, the hum of arriving guests grew louder, their laughter mingling with the quartet's melody. Amara glanced out the window, her eyes scanning the crowd for a figure she dreaded yet longed to see. Would Loretta really come? Could she face the security guards, the judgmental stares, the risk of being turned away? Amara's chest tightened with a mix of fear and guilt. She'd spent years convincing herself that Loretta was gone, that the mother who'd once braided her hair and sung her to sleep was lost forever. But what if she wasn't? What if the woman who wrote that letter was still the mother who'd loved her fiercely, despite everything? The clock on the mantel ticked closer to the ceremony. Amara smoothed her gown, her reflection steady now, but her heart was a storm. She could call security and have Loretta escorted away before anyone noticed. She could preserve the illusion, keep her past locked in its cage. But as she folded the letter and tucked it into her satin clutch, a flicker of doubt stirred. What kind of woman would she be if she turned her mother away on the most important day of her life? The question lingered, heavy and unanswered, as she stepped toward the door, her perfect dream teetering on the edge of truth. Amara stood frozen in the bridal suite, the crumpled letter from her mother, Loretta, trembling in her hands like a relic from a life she'd tried to forget. The Atlanta estate buzzed with wedding preparations outside, but inside the air was thick with the ghosts of her past. As she stared at the shaky script, "My dearest Amara, I'm so proud of you." Her mind spiraled back to a time when her mother's voice was her world, a beacon of love in a crumbling Atlanta neighborhood. The memories came unbidden, sharp and vivid, like photographs scattered across a dusty attic floor. She was 6 again, curled up on a sagging couch in their one-bedroom apartment, the scent of cinnamon and molasses filling the air. Loretta, her ebony skin glowing under the dim kitchen light, hummed an old gospel tune as she rolled dough for Christmas cookies. Her hands, strong and sure, guided Amara's tiny fingers to shape stars and bells, their laughter mingling with the crackle of a second-hand radio. "You're my little artist," Loretta would say, her eyes bright with pride, as Amara sprinkled sugar crystals with exaggerated care. Those evenings, spent reading picture books or braiding each other's hair, were Amara's haven, a world where love was as certain as the sunrise. Loretta had been a third-grade teacher then, her classroom a sanctuary of books and hope in a school where paint peeled from the walls. She'd come home with stories of her students, her voice alive with purpose as she tucked Amara into bed. "You can be anything, baby girl," she'd whisper, her calloused fingers brushing Amara's cheek. "The world's big, and you're bigger." Amara believed her, dreaming of cities beyond their cracked sidewalks, of a life where she'd make her mother proud. But the light in Loretta's eyes dimmed when Amara's father, Marcus, died in a construction accident when Amara was 10. The loss was a crack in their foundation, and Loretta, once unbreakable, began to fracture. Amara remembered the first time she smelled whiskey on her mother's breath, sharp and sour, as Loretta sat staring at Marcus's old jacket, tears streaking her face. "Just a bad day, baby," she'd mumbled. But the bad days grew into weeks, then years. The apartment, once warm with laughter, became a battleground of empty bottles and unpaid bills. Loretta lost her job, her spark, her dignity. Amara, barely a teenager, learned to hide her mother's bottles, to lie to neighbors about the shouting, to carry the weight of shame like a second skin. By 16, Amara was mothering her mother. She'd drag Loretta to bed after late-night binges, clean up the mess of spilled liquor, and pray no one at school would ask why her clothes were threadbare. The worst came on her 17th birthday, a day she'd hoped would be different. Loretta had promised to bake her favorite red velvet cake, just like the old days. Instead, Amara found her mother slumped outside their apartment, her dress stained, her words slurred as she begged for money in front of Amara's friends. The laughter of those girls, sharp and mocking, burned into Amara's memory. "Your mom's a drunk," one whispered, and Amara's cheeks flamed with humiliation. That night she packed a bag, left a note, and vowed never to look back. At 18, she boarded a bus to New York, leaving Loretta behind like a chapter she'd torn from a book. Now standing in the bridal suite, Amara's throat tightened at the memory. She'd built a new life, new name, new story, new self. She was Amara Johnson, the interior designer who'd won over Manhattan's elite, the fiancée of Ethan Whitfield, whose family name opened doors she'd never dreamed of. But Loretta's letter was a crack in her carefully constructed world, a reminder that the past could not be erased. She sank onto the ottoman, her gown pooling around her like a fallen cloud, and closed her eyes. What did her mother want now? Forgiveness? A place in her life? Or just to ruin the one day Amara had dreamed of since she was a girl? From Loretta's perspective, the years apart had been a different kind of hell. Alone in a shelter on Atlanta's east side, she'd wake each morning with Amara's face in her mind, her daughter's laughter a distant echo. She'd clutch a faded photo of Amara at 7, gap-toothed and grinning, tucked inside a worn Bible. Every night she'd pray for the strength to stay sober, to make amends, to be the mother Amara deserved. 3 years clean, she'd found purpose in a soup kitchen, serving meals to those as broken as she'd once been. But the ache for her daughter never faded. When she learned of Amara's wedding, through a chance glimpse of an engagement announcement in a discarded newspaper, hope flickered. She'd written the letter with trembling hands, not expecting a reply, only praying for a chance to see her baby girl shine. Amara didn't know this. She didn't know the nights Loretta had spent sobbing, the days she'd spent volunteering to rebuild her soul, or the quiet pride she felt hearing of Amara's success. All Amara knew was the pain, the shame, the fear that her mother's presence would unravel her perfect day. She stood smoothing the letter against her palm, her heart a battlefield of anger and longing. The clock ticked closer to the ceremony, and the weight of her choice pressed harder. She could keep Loretta out, preserve the illusion of her perfect life, or she could face the truth, the mother she'd abandoned, the love she'd buried. The decision loomed as heavy as the gown she wore, and Amara felt the first stirrings of a question she wasn't ready to answer. What kind of daughter would she be if she turned her mother away? The Atlanta afternoon shimmered with spring warmth, the Whitfield estate a vision of opulence under a cloudless sky. White roses spilled from marble urns, their fragrance mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Guests in tailored suits and silk gowns glided across the manicured lawn, their laughter bright against the clink of crystal glasses. Inside the bridal suite, Amara Johnson stood at the window, her heart a tangled knot of dread and guilt. The letter from her mother, Loretta, burned in her clutch, its words, "I'll be there to see you walk down the aisle," echoing like a warning. She scanned the crowd, praying her mother wouldn't come, yet unable to shake the image of Loretta's face, weathered but hopeful, from her mind. A sharp knock broke her reverie. Her maid of honor, Chloe, burst in, her face flushed with urgency. "Amara, there's a woman outside," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the door. "She's at the main gate saying she's here for the wedding. She looks homeless. Security's handling it, but she's insisting she knows you." Amara's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the window's silk curtain. She stepped closer, peering through the glass, and there she was. Loretta Johnson, her mother, standing just beyond the wrought iron gate. Loretta was a shadow of the woman Amara remembered. Her once vibrant frame was thin, draped in a threadbare coat that hung loosely on her shoulders. Her dark skin, once radiant, was etched with lines of hardship, and her hair, once meticulously braided, was tucked messily under a faded scarf. In her hands she clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers, daisies and clover, likely plucked from a community garden, their stems tied with a piece of twine. She stood alone, her eyes fixed on the estate, a quiet dignity in her posture despite the security guards looming nearby. Amara's heart sank, a mix of shame and sorrow flooding her chest. She wanted to run to her mother, to pull her away before anyone noticed, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. "Tell them to keep her out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Chloe nodded, slipping out to relay the message, but Amara's eyes stayed locked on Loretta, who seemed oblivious to the growing attention at the gate. A group of groomsmen, young men in crisp tuxedos, had gathered near the entrance, their faces alight with the reckless confidence of too much champagne. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Tyler, spotted Loretta and smirked. "Look at this beggar woman, thinking she can crash a wedding like this," he called, his voice carrying over the hum of the crowd. Laughter erupted from his friends, sharp and cruel, drawing the eyes of nearby guests. Another groomsman, emboldened, raised his glass. "Hey, lady, you lost? This ain't the soup kitchen." The words sliced through the air, and a few onlookers chuckled, their curiosity turning to amusement. Loretta didn't flinch, but her shoulders sagged slightly, the bouquet trembling in her hands. Tyler, grinning, stepped closer, his glass tilted. "Let's give her a toast," he jeered, and with a flick of his wrist, he poured a stream of champagne over Loretta's head. The golden liquid splattered across her scarf, dripping down her face, mingling with the silent tears that traced her cheeks. The other groomsmen roared with laughter, one tossing a cocktail napkin that fluttered to the ground like a mocking flag. "Go back to the street, Grandma," another shouted, and the crowd's laughter grew, a chorus of indifference. Amara watched, horrified, from the window. Her mother stood motionless, her eyes downcast. The wildflowers still clutched tightly, as if they were her only anchor. The sight was a dagger to Amara's heart, stirring memories of the woman who'd once shielded her from the world's cruelty. She wanted to scream, to run out and stop them, but shame held her back. A cold voice whispering that Loretta's presence would ruin everything. Her marriage, her status, her perfect dream. Among the onlookers, one figure stood apart. Clara, Ethan's aunt, a silver-haired woman in her 60s, watched from the edge of the crowd, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes, sharp with the wisdom of years, lingered on Loretta's quiet endurance. Clara had known loss. Her own brother, estranged for decades over a family feud, had taught her the cost of pride. She took a step forward, as if to intervene, but hesitated, her hand tightening on her purse. The moment passed and the groomsmen turned away, their laughter fading as they rejoined the party, leaving Loretta drenched and alone. Amara's hands shook as she turned from the window, her reflection in the mirror now a stranger's. She'd told Chloe to keep her mother out, but the image of Loretta, humiliated yet unbowed, seared into her mind. The wildflowers, so fragile yet fiercely held, were a symbol of a love Amara had tried to forget. Guilt clawed at her, mingling with the fear of what her mother's presence meant. Would the Whitfields, with their polished lineage, ever accept her if they knew the truth? Would Ethan, with his gentle smile, look at her differently? The quartet's music swelled, signaling the ceremony's approach. Amara smoothed her gown, her fingers brushing the letter in her clutch. She could still keep the secret, let security escort Loretta away, and walk down the aisle as the woman she'd created, untouched by her past. But as she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, not the broken woman at the gate, but the one who'd once sung her to sleep, who'd promised her the world. The weight of that promise pressed against her heart, and for the first time, Amara wondered if her perfect dream was worth the cost of her mother's love. The grand tent of the Whitfield estate glowed under crystal chandeliers, their light dancing across tables adorned with silver and roses. The air buzzed with the clink of glasses and the soft strains of an orchestra, as Atlanta's elite savored the opulence of Amara Johnson's wedding. But for Amara, standing beside her new husband, Ethan, the joy of the moment was a fragile veneer. Her heart still pounded from the scene at the gate, where her mother, Loretta, had been doused with champagne and mocked by groomsmen. She avoided the windows, afraid to see if Loretta was still there, her tattered bouquet a silent accusation. The weight of her own words, "Keep her out," pressed against her chest, a betrayal she couldn't shake. The reception flowed seamlessly, guests toasting the couple with practiced elegance. Amara forced smiles, her ebony skin radiant in her gown, but her eyes darted nervously toward the tent's entrance. She half expected security to report back, confirming Loretta's removal, yet a part of her, a part she barely acknowledged, hoped her mother wouldn't give up. The thought was a flicker of warmth in the cold storm of her shame. Then a hush fell over the crowd. The orchestra faltered, strings trailing off into silence. Amara's breath caught as heads turned toward the tent's entrance. There stood Loretta Johnson, her thin frame dwarfed by the grandeur around her. Her coat, stained with champagne, clung damply to her shoulders, and her scarf, once neatly tied, hung askew, revealing gray-streaked hair matted with wine. In her trembling hands, she clutched the wilted bouquet of daisies and clover, their stems bent but unbroken. Her dark eyes, etched with years of hardship, scanned the room until they found Amara. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Who let her in?" one of the groomsmen, Tyler, muttered loudly, his voice thick with disdain. A ripple of laughter spread among his friends. But it died quickly as Loretta took a step forward, her chin lifted with a quiet resolve. Amara's heart raced, torn between the urge to rush to her mother and the fear of what this moment would cost her. Ethan, sensing her tension, squeezed her hand, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Excuse me," Loretta said, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the murmurs like a bell in fog. The room stilled, every eye on the woman who seemed so out of place, yet stood with an unshakable presence. "I don't mean to ruin this beautiful day," she continued, her gaze fixed on Amara. "I came to give my daughter something, to tell her something, even if she doesn't want to hear it." Tyler scoffed, stepping forward. "Lady, you've got no business here. Take your weeds and go." He gestured at the bouquet, prompting a few chuckles from the crowd. But Loretta didn't flinch. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a faded photograph, its edges worn from years of handling. She held it up, her hands steady now. "This is my Amara," she said, her voice growing stronger. "At 7, smiling at the library we built together in our old neighborhood." A murmur rippled through the guests. Amara's throat tightened, memories flooding back, sitting on Loretta's lap in that tiny library, turning pages of The Secret Garden, dreaming of worlds beyond their own. Loretta's eyes glistened, but her voice held firm. "I was a teacher once," she said. "I built that library with my own hands, with donations from folks who believed in giving kids like Amara a chance. I had a life, a purpose, but I lost it all. My husband, my home, my daughter, because I let grief and whiskey win." The tent was silent now, the laughter gone. Clara, Ethan's aunt, stood at the edge of the crowd, her silver hair catching the light. Her eyes, sharp with understanding, never left Loretta. She'd known loss too, and the pain of broken family ties. Loretta continued, her voice rising with conviction. "I've been sober for 3 years, 1,095 days. I work at a soup kitchen, serving folks who've lost as much as I have. I live in a shelter, but I'm standing here because of this." She held up the photograph again, Amara's young face beaming from it. "This picture kept me going, reminded me I had a daughter to make proud, even if she didn't want me anymore." Amara's vision blurred with tears, her carefully applied makeup smearing. She remembered that library, the smell of old books, her mother's laughter as they shelved stories together. Loretta's words were a mirror, reflecting the love Amara had buried under years of hurt. "I'm not here to shame you, Amara," Loretta said, softer now, her eyes locked on her daughter's. "I'm here because you're my baby girl, and I love you. I came to give you these flowers, picked from the garden where I volunteer, because they're all I have to offer, but they're given with love, the kind that never stops, no matter how far you run." Tyler shifted uncomfortably, his bravado fading. The guests, once amused, now watched in stunned silence, some wiping their eyes. Clara took a step forward, her hand trembling, as if wanting to speak but unsure how. Amara stood frozen, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Loretta's voice, raw and unyielding, had stripped away the wall she'd built. The truth of her mother's journey, her fight, her love, her dignity, hung in the air, a challenge to every judgment in the room. Amara felt the weight of her own silence, the years she'd spent hiding, and wondered if she could find the courage to meet her mother's gaze. The silence in the Whitfield estate's grand tent was deafening, a fragile pause that held the weight of Loretta Johnson's words. Her voice, raw with love and resolve, still echoed in the air, her faded photograph of a young Amara raised like a banner of truth. The guests, moments ago whispering with judgment, stood frozen, their eyes darting between the drenched, weary black woman at the tent's entrance and the radiant bride at its center. Amara Johnson, her ivory gown shimmering under the chandeliers, felt her heart splinter. Tears streamed down her face, smearing the makeup she'd spent hours perfecting, as her mother's confession of loss, redemption, and unyielding love cracked open the walls she'd built around her past. Loretta lowered the photograph, her hands trembling, but her gaze steady on her daughter. The wilted bouquet of daisies and clover, stained from the champagne poured at the gate, lay at her feet, a symbol of her battered but unbroken spirit. Amara's breath hitched, her body rooted to the spot where she stood beside Ethan, her new husband. His hand, warm and steady, gripped hers, but his eyes were wide with confusion, searching her face for answers she'd never given. The crowd waited, the air thick with anticipation, as if the world hinged on what Amara would do next. Tyler, the groomsman who'd led the mockery, shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of Loretta's dignity. A few guests wiped their eyes, their laughter replaced by a quiet shame. Among them, Clara, Ethan's silver-haired aunt, stood with a hand pressed to her chest, her face etched with understanding. She'd known the pain of family rifts, the regret of years lost to pride, and Loretta's words stirred memories of her own reconciliation with her estranged brother. Her eyes met Amara's, a silent urging to bridge the chasm before it was too late. Amara's lips parted, but no words came. The memories Loretta had invoked, of library afternoons, of her mother's laughter as they shelved books together, flooded her, mingling with the sting of later years, when whiskey and despair had stolen the woman she loved. She saw her mother now, not as the broken figure she'd fled, but as the woman who'd fought for 3 years to reclaim her life, who'd carried her daughter's image through every dark night. The shame that had kept Amara silent twisted into something new. Regret, raw and piercing, for the years she'd turned her back. "Mom," Amara whispered, the word a fragile thread breaking the silence. Loretta's eyes widened, a flicker of hope igniting in their depths. Amara took a shaky step forward, then another, her gown trailing behind her like a river of light. The crowd parted, their murmurs fading as she moved toward her mother. Tears spilled freely now, and she didn't care that her perfect image was unraveling. "I'm so sorry," she choked out, her voice loud enough for all to hear. "I'm sorry I pushed you away. Sorry I was ashamed. Sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." Loretta's face crumpled, tears tracing the lines of her weathered cheeks. She opened her arms and Amara ran to her, heedless of the champagne stains or the crumpled flowers. Their embrace was fierce, a collision of years lost and love reclaimed. Amara's sobs muffled against her mother's damp coat. "I missed you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I missed you every day, but I was too angry to admit it." "It's okay, baby girl," Loretta murmured, stroking Amara's hair as she had when she was a child. "I never stopped loving you. Not for a second." The tent seemed to vanish, the glittering guests and chandeliers fading into the background as mother and daughter held each other, their shared pain and hope weaving them back together. Amara pulled back, her eyes searching her mother's face. "You're so strong, Mom," she said, her voice steadier now. "Stronger than I ever gave you credit for." She turned to the crowd, her chin lifting with a courage she hadn't known she possessed. "This is my mother, Loretta Johnson," she declared, her voice ringing clear. "I lied to all of you," she said. "She was gone because I was ashamed of her struggles. But I was wrong. She's fought harder than anyone I know, and I'm proud to be her daughter." A soft gasp rippled through the guests, but Clara stepped forward, her eyes shining. "That took courage, Amara," she said, her voice warm with approval. "I lost my brother to pride once, but I got him back. You're doing the right thing." She began to clap, slow and deliberate, and soon others joined, a wave of applause that felt less like celebration and more like acknowledgement of a truth laid bare. Amara turned back to Loretta, a smile breaking through her tears. "Mom, will you dance with me?" she asked, her voice trembling with hope. "I know it's not the father-daughter dance, but I want you with me." Loretta's face lit up, her eyes brighter than Amara had seen in years. "I'd love nothing more," she said, her voice thick with emotion. The orchestra struck up a slow waltz, its notes soft and haunting. Amara took her mother's hand, leading her to the dance floor. Loretta's coat was still damp, her scarf askew, but she moved with a grace that belied her hardships. As they swayed together, Amara felt the weight of her past lift, replaced by a warmth she'd thought lost forever. The guests watched, some wiping tears, others whispering apologies for their earlier indifference. Ethan stood at the edge, his expression a mix of awe and uncertainty, but his nod to Amara was one of respect. For Amara, the dance was more than a moment. It was a homecoming. She saw her mother not as a shadow of shame, but as a woman who'd fought to rise again, who'd loved her through every mistake. As the music swelled, she knew this was the wedding she truly wanted. Not perfect, but real. The Whitfield Estates grand tent glowed like a beacon under the Atlanta night sky. But for Amara Johnson, the world had shrunk to a quiet bench beneath a canopy of stars. The reception hummed on, a blur of music and laughter, but she sat apart, her ivory gown pooling around her like moonlight. Beside her was her mother, Loretta Johnson, her damp coat and faded scarf a stark contrast to the opulence around them. The air was cool, scented with jasmine and the faint tang of champagne still clinging to Loretta's clothes. Their dance had ended, but the warmth of their embrace lingered, a fragile bridge rebuilt after a decade of silence. Amara's heart, raw from tears and truth, felt lighter now, but questions hung heavy between them. Loretta's hands, weathered yet steady, rested in her lap, still clutching the crumpled photograph of Amara at 7. Her dark eyes, etched with years of struggle, gazed at the moon, as if searching for words to fill the gap between mother and daughter. Amara broke the silence first, her voice soft but urgent. "Mom, why didn't you give up on me? After all the times I pushed you away, changed my number, moved across the country, why did you keep trying?" Her words trembled, carrying the weight of guilt and wonder. Loretta turned to her, a small smile softening her lined face. "Because you're my heart, Amara," she said, her voice low and rich, like the gospel hymns she used to sing. "Every night in that shelter, I'd hold your picture and pray. I'd see your smile, hear your laugh from those library days, and it kept me going. I failed you, baby, but love doesn't quit, even when it's broken." Her words were a melody of pain and hope, stirring memories of a time when Amara believed her mother could fix anything. Amara's eyes stung, the memory of their library afternoons flooding back. Shelves of worn books. Loretta's patient voice guiding her through stories of heroines in far-off lands. "I thought I'd lost you," Amara whispered, her fingers brushing the edge of Loretta's coat. "I thought the mom I loved was gone forever." She paused, her voice cracking. "But you're here, and you're stronger than I ever knew. I want you back in my life, Mom. Come to New York with me and Ethan. Let us take care of you." Loretta shook her head, her smile bittersweet. "No, baby girl," she said firmly. "I've got my own path now. I clean offices at night, got a little room at the shelter, and I'm saving every penny to stand on my own. I need to do this, not just for me, but for us." Her eyes shone with a quiet pride, the kind that comes from clawing back from rock bottom. "I've been sober 3 years, Amara. I volunteer at the soup kitchen, helping folks who've lost hope like I did. That's my redemption, and I won't let you take it from me." Amara's chest tightened, a mix of admiration and ache. She saw her mother not as the broken woman she'd fled, but as a warrior who'd fought through darkness to reclaim her soul. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I need you, Mom. I need us to be a family again." Loretta reached for her hand, her touch warm despite the chill of the night. "We are, sweetheart," she said. "We'll take it slow, rebuild what we lost. But I'm not going anywhere." The conversation shifted, Amara's mind sparking with a new idea. "What if we did something together?" she asked, her eyes brightening. "A project, something to help people like you, people who need a second chance. A community center, maybe, with books and classes like the library you built." Loretta's face lit up, a spark of the teacher she'd once been. "A place for hope," she murmured. "I'd like that. A place where folks can start over. Like I did. Ethan approached, his tuxedo slightly rumpled from the night's chaos. He knelt beside the bench, his blue eyes searching Loretta's face. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice steady but soft, "I owe you an apology. I didn't know about you, and I let those men treat you terribly. That won't happen again. You're family now." Loretta's eyes glistened, and she took his hand. "You're a good man, Ethan," she said. "Take care of my girl, and we'll be just fine." Clara, Ethan's aunt, joined them, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "I've been listening," she admitted, her voice warm with empathy. "Loretta, your strength reminds me of my brother. We lost years to pride, but we found our way back. You and Amara will too." Her words, spoken from the wisdom of age, resonated with the quiet hope of reconciliation, a sentiment that stirred the hearts of those who lived long enough to know its cost. As the night deepened, Amara felt a shift within her. The perfect wedding she'd planned had unraveled, but in its place was something truer, a family reborn, a mother reclaimed, a future built on love rather than appearances. She looked at Loretta, seeing not just the woman who'd stumbled, but the one who'd risen, whose love had endured through every storm. The stars above seemed brighter, and Amara knew this moment, this honest, fragile connection, was the real dream she'd been chasing all along. The Atlanta sun hung low over the east side, casting a warm glow on a modest brick building that had once been a shuttered community center. Today it buzzed with life, its freshly painted walls adorned with murals of books and blooming flowers. A sign above the entrance read Loretta's Library, its letters bold against the soft hum of a gathering crowd. Amara Johnson stood at the podium, her dark eyes shining with a pride that had nothing to do with the opulence of her wedding a year ago. Beside her was her mother, Loretta Johnson, no longer in a threadbare coat, but in a simple navy dress, her gray-streaked hair neatly braided, her face radiant with purpose. The crowd, neighbors, volunteers, and a handful of familiar faces from that unforgettable wedding day, watched as mother and daughter prepared to cut the ribbon on a dream born from reconciliation. Amara's voice carried over the murmurs, steady and clear. "This library is more than a building," she said, her hand resting lightly on Loretta's shoulder. "It's a place for second chances, for people who've lost their way, but not their hope." Her words echoed the night she'd stood in a glittering tent, her perfect wedding unraveling into a moment of raw truth. That night, Loretta's courage had shattered Amara's carefully built walls, teaching her that love was stronger than shame. Now, a year later, they stood together, not just as mother and daughter, but as partners in a mission to lift others as Loretta had lifted herself. The library was their shared vision, born on that starlit bench after the wedding. It offered books, job training, and counseling for those struggling with addiction or homelessness, a beacon for Atlanta's forgotten. Loretta had poured her heart into it, her years as a teacher guiding the design of reading rooms and workshops. Amara, with her design expertise, had transformed the dilapidated space into a haven of light and warmth. The project had been funded by donations, many from wedding guests moved by Loretta's story, including Ethan's aunt, Clara, who stood in the crowd now, her silver hair catching the sun as she smiled with quiet pride. Loretta stepped forward, her voice soft but resonant, the same voice that had silenced a tent full of skeptics. "I used to think my life was over," she said, her eyes scanning the faces before her. "I lost my husband, my home, my daughter, but I found my way back day by day because of love." She glanced at Amara, her smile trembling. "This library is for everyone who needs a chance to start again, to know they're not alone." The crowd erupted in applause, but for Amara, the sound faded as she looked at her mother, seeing the woman who'd once read her bedtime stories, now a symbol of resilience. Ethan joined them, his presence steady beside Amara. He'd embraced Loretta as family, spending evenings with her over coffee, learning about her past as a teacher and her dreams for the future. His family, the Whitfields, had surprised Amara with their support, their initial shock at her hidden past giving way to respect. Margaret, Ethan's mother, had even attended planning meetings for the library, her polished demeanor softening as she listened to Loretta's ideas. Clara, the most steadfast ally, had become a regular at the library's fundraisers, her own story of reconciling with her brother fueling her commitment. This is what family does, she'd told Amara once, her eyes warm with understanding. We show up even when it's hard. Loretta's new life was a testament to her strength. She'd found a job managing the library, her days filled with organizing book drives and mentoring visitors. She lived in a small apartment now, her savings from night shifts as a cleaner, helping her stand on her own. Amara visited often, their weekends spent cooking recipes from their past. Red velvet cake, molasses cookies, rebuilding the bond they'd lost. Each visit was a step toward healing, a reminder that love could mend even the deepest wounds. As the ribbon fell, sliced by a pair of gleaming scissors, the crowd cheered, children rushing into the library to explore its shelves. Amara watched Loretta kneel beside a young girl, pointing out a book with a gentle smile, and her heart swelled. This was the mother she'd always known, buried beneath years of pain but never truly gone. The library wasn't just a building, it was a legacy of their reunion, a promise that no one was beyond redemption. Amara stepped away from the podium, linking arms with Loretta. "We did this, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Loretta squeezed her hand, her eyes bright with tears. "We did, baby girl, and we'll keep doing it together." Ethan joined them, his arm around Amara, his smile reflecting the family they'd become. Clara approached, her voice soft but firm. "You've given this city something beautiful," she said, "a reminder that love and courage can change everything." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Amara felt a peace she hadn't known a year ago. Her wedding had been a turning point, not because of its grandeur, but because it had brought her mother back. Loretta's library was their shared triumph, a testament to the truth that love was not about perfection, but about showing up, forgiving, and starting again. For Amara, it was a legacy she'd carry forever, a lesson learned under the stars, that the heart's truest dreams are built on second chances. This story of Amara and Loretta Johnson is a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances. It reminds us that family, however broken, can be mended with courage, and that dignity shines brightest in the face of hardship. Loretta's journey from despair to redemption, and Amara's choice to embrace her mother, inspire us to look beyond appearances and offer compassion to those who need it most. We hope this tale has touched your heart, urging you to reflect on the bonds that matter in your own life. Please share your thoughts in the comments. How did this story move you? Where are you watching from? And what lessons of love and resilience resonate with you? Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Until next time, keep believing in the beauty of second chances.